I feel many my age have had a similar experience with Tarzan, falling in love with the character and his story because of the phenomenal Disney film from 1999. The engaging story, colourful characters, tense action sequences, beautiful animation, and an absolutely iconic soundtrack by Phil Collins resulted in one of Disney's most beloved movies. In many ways, this is the definitive Tarzan tale, and what many think of when they hear the name Tarzan. But this was not the only depiction of Tarzan. It is a well-known fact that there have been many adaptations, movies, and serials about the Lord of the Apes. From Disney's Tarzan to my favorite film of all time, Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. In fact, Tarzan has a history and legacy far greater and more influential than almost any other fictional character in history. Appearing in over 50 movies in over 100 years, The Legend of Tarzan has become a story that families throughout the generations have come to know and love. In this video, we are going to go through the history of Tarzan and his depiction in film, as well as his growth and evolution throughout the years. So get ready, because we are going to go on a journey that spans over 103 years. So before we jump into Tarzan's on-screen debut, let's tackle the origins of the character. Tarzan first appeared in the 1912 novel Tarzan of the Apes, written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The novel set the stage for the story of Tarzan that we know to this day. John and Alice Clayton are marooned along the coast of Western Africa in 1888. Sometime later, their son John Clayton II is born. When he is only one, his mother dies and his father is attacked and murdered by the king of the apes, Kerchak. Tarzan is then adopted by a female ape named Carla. Clayton is named Tarzan by the apes because of his white skin, and he is raised knowing nothing about his human heritage. Tarzan grows older, stronger, and wiser, going on misadventures like discovering his parents' cabin, his first fight with another gorilla, killing Kerchak to become the king of the apes, and starting a rivalry with an African tribe who killed his ape mother. The story takes a turn that you might not expect after the introduction of Jane and the other explorers once they are marooned. As usual, Tarzan falls in love with Jane. But after she is rescued, Tarzan travels to Wisconsin, USA to be with her, but learns the painful truth that she has become engaged to William Clayton, the man who has claimed Tarzan's inheritance. Tarzan then learns his true identity as John Clayton II, the Earl of Greystoke. However, instead of reclaiming his inheritance from William, Tarzan chooses rather to conceal and renounce his heritage for the sake of Jane's happiness. The novel tackled themes like the impact of hereditary on behavior, racial superiority, civilization, especially as Tarzan struggles with his identity as a human, his sexuality, and escapism. The novel was then adapted into two films, Tarzan of the Apes, released in 1918, and The Romance of Tarzan in 1918. Both of them starring Elmo Lincoln as Tarzan and based on the first and second parts of the novel. And this is where Tarzan's cinematic evolution and history begin. In 1918, we got the very first Tarzan movie ever made, titled Tarzan of the Apes. The film stars Elmo Lincoln and adapts the first half of Edgar Rice Burroughs' original novel. The remainder of the novel was adapted into its sequel, The Romance of Tarzan, released the same year. Tarzan of the Apes is considered the most faithful of all novel adaptations. The films were silent and unsurprisingly black and white, which were common at the time. Tarzan himself looked quite similar to his usual and expected self, a large man in a loincloth. The biggest departure from what we were expecting is the inclusion of the over-the-shoulder sash of material that was included to censor the actor's bare chest. These films' success resulted in another two sequels starring Andrew Lincoln as Tarzan, The Son of Tarzan in 1920 and The Adventures of Tarzan in 1921. The Son of Tarzan was a movie serial that consisted of 15 chapters and had a runtime of 253 minutes. The serials primarily followed Jack Clayton, also known as Korak, the son of Tarzan and Jane. While living in London, Jack longs for a life of adventure, much like his father before him. While another Tarzan sequel starring Elmo Lincoln would be released in December of 1921, over a year before then, a new Tarzan film would be released with a new lead. The Revenge of Tarzan cast Gene Poehler as Tarzan in a silent adventure film that was promoted as The Return of Tarzan before being renamed for American audiences. The film is the third ever Tarzan movie and was an adaptation of Edgar Rice Burroughs' second Tarzan novel titled The Return of Tarzan. The film follows Tarzan and Jane as they travel to France to help an old friend. After a series of unfortunate events, Tarzan is able to rescue Jane from a lion and defeats the antagonist and his henchmen. Gene Poehler was significantly slimmer as Tarzan and wore a similar over-the-shoulder getup made of animal furs. The film is unfortunately considered lost. However, a complete print does exist under the title The Return of Tarzan in the National Film and Television Archive in London. The Adventures of Tarzan saw the return of Elmo Lincoln for his final role of Tarzan in another 15-chapter serial. The story begins as Jane is abducted by Arab slave traders. While attempting to save her, he confronts William Clayton, who seeks to take Tarzan's family title from him. The complete 15 episodes of this serial have unfortunately not survived, with only 10 episodes included in the DVD re-release. 1927's Tarzan and the Golden Lion was the next cinematic adventure featuring Tarzan and was based on the novel of the same name, which is the 9th novel about Tarzan written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The film cast James Pearce as Tarzan. Tarzan and the Golden Lion was Pearce's only on-screen appearance as Tarzan. He did go on to voice Tarzan in the Tarzan radio series from 1932 to 1936. The film revolves around Tarzan trying to save his sister from being sacrificed to a lion god. The film was considered lost for many decades, with Pearce trying in vain to locate a copy before his death. A complete print of the film was discovered in the 1990s. Pearce's Tarzan was probably the slimmest incarnation of Tarzan to date, and wore an outfit very similar to that of Gene Poehler. The following year of 1928 saw the release of Tarzan the Mighty, an action film serial consisting of 15 chapters. Tarzan and the Golden Lion was considered a failure, and so a direct sequel was not made. Rather, Tarzan the Mighty was a serial that was an adaptation of Jungle Tales of Tarzan, which was a collection of short stories written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Frank Merrill was cast as Tarzan and was the gymnastic champion of 1918, who looked and moved exactly like the Tarzan of the novels. Because of his background in gymnastics, Merrill actually came up with the iconic vine-swinging technique used by Tarzan. Visually, Merrill's Tarzan shared a similar look with that of the Tarzans that came before him, wearing a slash of material across his chest with spotted fur. This film, much like earlier films and several that came after it, have also unfortunately been lost to time. Only a year later, in 1929, Tarzan the Tiger was released. This movie serial was a sequel to Tarzan the Mighty and was greenlit because of the prior serial's success. The film follows Tarzan's estate being destroyed by Arabs and Jane being sold into slavery. The serial was filmed as a silent film, but there are partial dubbing. This results in it being the first ever Tarzan film to include sound. This is also the very first time we hear the Tarzan yell, but it must be stated that this yell is quite a far departure to the yell that would become an iconic part of the character, and was described more as a nee-yeah. However, the inclusion of sound spelled the end for Frank Merrill as Tarzan. There were planned sequels to end the trilogy, but they were scrapped after Merrill's voice was deemed unsuitable for sound films. There was a 4-year gap before we received the next portrayal of the Lord of the Apes, considered by many to be the Tarzan movie, outshining even the 1999 Disney release. This is for a wide variety of reasons, but most importantly was the casting of Johnny Weismuller as Tarzan, a role he would reprise for 11 sequels. This was also the first time we heard the true and iconic rendition of Tarzan's legendary yell that would be used and adapted to this very day. The film is loosely based on Burroughs' 1912 novel Tarzan of the Apes, with the largest departure coming with the ending as Tarzan and Jane stay together in the jungle. Weismuller's Tarzan has the closest resemblance to the stereotypical Tarzan so far. His slender yet toned frame matched with a simple loincloth, keeping his chest bare. The only thing missing is the long hair, and we would have a perfect visual representation of the character. While there are a total of 12 Tarzan films starring Johnny Weismuller, he remains arguably the most famous Tarzan portrayal. He is not the only one to have acted as the character during this time, however. Tarzan the Fearless is a 12-chapter serial that was released in 1933. Buster Crabbe was cast as Tarzan. Crabbe's Tarzan bore a striking resemblance to Weismuller, wearing a loincloth with short hair. The serial focuses on the relationship between Tarzan and Mary, a substitute for Jane. The film was received rather poorly and was described as incredibly crude. This marked the only time Crabbe was cast in the role of Tarzan. In 1934, we had the return of Johnny Weismuller as Tarzan in 1934's Tarzan and His Mate. Weismuller would become the definitive Tarzan with a total of 12 movies as the legendary character, from 1932 to 1948. That is 16 years playing the iconic character. These films included the aforementioned Tarzan the Ape Man, Tarzan and His Mate, Tarzan Escapes, Tarzan Finds a Son, Tarzan's Secret Treasure, Tarzan's New York Adventure, Tarzan's Triumphs, Tarzan's Desert Mystery, Tarzan and the Amazons, Tarzan and the Leopard Woman, Tarzan and the Huntress, and finally, Tarzan and the Mermaids. Ultimately, Weismuller is known by many to be the Tarzan, and we can see his legacy live on to this day through the iconic Tarzan Yell. 1935's The New Adventures of Tarzan was the only other portrayal of Tarzan during Weismuller's era of sequels. The 12-chapter serial cast Herman Brookes as Tarzan and is a much more authentic portrayal of the character, who was the cultured and well-educated gentleman similar to the original Edgar Rice Burroughs novels. Besides the characteristic changes to the character, his physical appearance remained rather similar to the current trends except with much darker hair. The serial was reviewed rather poorly in the USA, but was successful enough that a sequel feature film, Tarzan and the Green Goddess, was released in 1938. It was based on footage from the last 10 chapters of the serial with some minor additions and follows much of the same plot. 1949 saw Lex Barker take over the reins as Tarzan from Johnny Weismuller in Tarzan's Magic Fountain, a film that showcased a younger Tarzan that was in contrast to the older Weismuller. Many enjoyed Barker's younger Tarzan and praised the actor for bringing in a youthful presence and an intimidating look, but were frustrated with the similar and repetitive story beats and narratives that had become stale over the years. Lex Barker would return for 4 more sequels from 1950 to 1953. These sequels included Tarzan and the Slave Girl, Tarzan's Peril, Tarzan Savage Fury, and Tarzan and the She-Devil. Unfortunately, Lex Barker's career as the 10th Tarzan was cut short as he was found unconscious at 53 years old and later pronounced dead. While his movies are not remembered too fondly, many enjoyed his blonde rendition of the character. Gordon Scott was the next to receive the mantle of Tarzan. He made his debut in 1955's Tarzan's Hidden Jungle. This film accomplished quite a few unique milestones with its release. It was the final Tarzan film to be produced by RKO, a partnership that began back in 1943 with Johnny Weismuller. This was also the last Tarzan theatre film to be released in black and white, and there was also a noticeable omission of the character of Jane. Gordon Scott would play Tarzan in 6 movies over a 5-year span. The sequels included Tarzan and the Lost Safari, Tarzan and the Trappers, Tarzan's Fight for Life, Tarzan's Great Adventure, and Tarzan the Magnificent. The biggest landmarks during this period were, of course, the jump to colour, as well as the removal of Tarzan's signature pigpen speaking pattern. Jane would also be removed from the films until her return in 1981. Gordon was a bodybuilder and so portrayed an incredibly tough and powerful version of the character. His depiction of an intelligent and literate Tarzan is remembered fondly, especially by fans of the original novels. Scott's final film was Tarzan the Magnificent, in which the villain was played by Jock Mahoney, the man who would take over the mantle of Tarzan from Scott. But a year before Tarzan the Magnificent, another depiction of Tarzan was released, titled Tarzan the Ape Man, starring Denny Miller. The film was an adaptation of the original novel Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs and a remake of the 1932 movie of the same name starring Johnny Weismuller. The film reused a lot of footage from the 1932 movie, rather than refilming, and many ludicrous decisions were made. In the film, it was panned by critics. Denny Miller's Tarzan was considerably smaller than Gordon Scott, but ensured the character still had an impressive physique. So Jock Mahoney officially took the mantle of Tarzan from Gordon Scott in 1962 with Tarzan Goes to India, the first of his two films as the star of Tarzan. The film shares many similarities with its sequel, Tarzan's Three Challenges, both having Tarzan leave the jungle and travel to the Far East, namely India and Thailand. Jock Mahoney was an ex-stuntman and so was able to bring a raw physicality to the role because of it. Mahoney was praised for his performance and received favorable reviews by fans. During filming for the sequel, Mahoney contracted dysentery, dengue fever, and finally pneumonia. His weight plummeted from 100 kgs to 79 kgs. While filming the film, Mahoney became the oldest actor to ever play Tarzan at 44 years old, a record that stands to this day. After his record-setting performance, Mahoney stepped away from the role and Mike Henry claimed it as his own with his debut performance as Tarzan the Ape Man in Tarzan and the Valley of Gold. Mike Henry brought back the big man look that earlier portrayals of the character had, and while many reviewed his acting ability as poor, they praised his physical attributes, stating that he was arguably the best Tarzan the movies had ever seen in regards to sheer physicality. Another aspect of Henry's portrayal that fans loved was his James Bond-esque portrayal of a tropical-suited, globe-trotting Tarzan. An interesting fact that sets this film apart from others is the inclusion of a novelization of Fritz Leiber. This was the first authorized Tarzan novel by another author other than Edgar Rice Burroughs, and was officially the 25th book in the series. Mike Henry appeared as Tarzan in two more films, Tarzan and the Great River and Tarzan and the Jungle Boy. An interesting event took place during filming as Henry was actually bitten by the chimpanzee actor Dinky, and the chimpanzee was unfortunately put down and Henry received 20 stitches. Henry then continued to try to sue the producers for creating an unsafe working environment during his trilogy of films. The situation was settled out of court. Another interesting fact was that all three of Mike Henry's films were filmed and edited before his first film was even released. Tarzan and the Jungle Boy was also the last film to be portrayed in the present day, with the rest of the Tarzan releases treating the Tarzan story as a period piece taking place in the early 1900s. Between Henry's second and third films, Tarzan's Jungle Rebellion was released. This movie cast Ron Ely as the Ape Man and was actually the pilot episode for the series titled Tarzan that ran from 1966 to 1968. The series lasted for 2 seasons and had a total of 57 episodes. Fans loved the series and the show continued to be shown on syndication over a variety of different channels until 2018, truly showing its longevity. Tarzan's Deadly Silence was released in 1970 and was another film composed of 2 episodes from Ron Ely's Tarzan series. This film was also the last film to be released for over a decade until 1981's Tarzan the Ape Man. During the Ape Man's hiatus from film, the first animated series was released. The series Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle. In many ways, the series is the most faithful of all screen-based adaptations of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan and featured a number of lost cities from the original novels. Tarzan was also depicted as intelligent and well-spoken, not the simple-minded character that had become accustomed to from the films. The series was also rotoscoped to allow for more realistic movements from the animated characters. The series created original episodes for 2 seasons, but episodes were also reused for the Batman Tarzan Adventure Hour, Tarzan and the Super 7, the Tarzan Lone Ranger Adventure Hour, and the Tarzan Lone Ranger Zorro Adventure Hour. The first season of the series was released on DVD on June 14, 2016 as part of its 40th anniversary. 1981 saw the release of the first Tarzan movie in over a decade, and this return to the screen was not the triumphant return many were expecting. The film is loosely based on the 1912 novel Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs, but from the point of view of Jane Parker. The movie was absolutely panned by fans and critics and is often found on lists for worst movies ever made. Miles O'Keefe was suddenly cast in the role of Tarzan as the original actor was fired, or quit, very early on in production. Make no mistake, despite the name of the movie, this film is more about Jane. Bo Derek was incredibly popular at the time, but refused to act in a film that was not directed by her husband, and the effects of that decision are present in this film. While Tarzan looks similar to past portrayals, his longer locks set the stage for what would become the norm for future events. The film also faced legal battle as MGM fell into conflict with Warner Brothers, who were also producing a Tarzan movie titled Greystoke. Warner Brothers also had the rights to the character from the Burroughs estate. MGM argued that the Derek film would be the second remake of their 1932 film Tarzan the Ape Man, which they had the right to do, having released the first remake in 1959. The Burroughs estate sued MGM. In 1984, Warner Brothers released their Tarzan film, Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, and we jumped from arguably the worst Tarzan movie ever made to, in my opinion, the greatest Tarzan ever made. The film was another adaptation of Edgar Rice Burroughs' original novel. It became the first Tarzan feature film to be nominated for an Academy Award. Christopher Lambert was cast as John Clayton, or Tarzan, despite the name never actually being mentioned in the script. Lambert's portrayal continued the new trend of long hair and reinserted Burroughs' characterization of an articulate and intelligent human being. Tarzan was also an expert at mimicry, which explained why he was able to grasp the human language so quickly. In my honest and humble opinion, this is the most emotional film in the Tarzan library, and Lambert's unique portrayal of the character and the journey he undertakes makes the film stand above the rest. In 1989, we got an action-adventure television movie by CBS titled Tarzan in Manhattan. Joe Lara was cast as Tarzan and would reprise his role as an unrelated Tarzan in a series titled Tarzan: The Epic Adventures. The film focuses on Tarzan and his journey in present-day New York. Joe Lara's physical portrayal continued the current trend of Tarzan with long hair, a trend that has now become the norm. Before Lara's television series was released, however, a French-Canadian-Mexican series titled Tarzan was released in 1999 and ran to 1995. In this version of the show, Tarzan was portrayed by Wold Larson and was depicted as a blonde environmentalist, with Jane being turned into a French ecologist. The series lasted for 3 seasons with 25 episodes per season. In 1996, Joe Lara returned as a different Tarzan from his earlier television film, in Tarzan: The Epic Adventures. It focuses on the character of Tarzan in his early years, after his first exposure to civilization but before his marriage to Jane. This version of Tarzan was filmed in Sun City Resort in South Africa, making it one of the few Tarzan productions to actually be filmed on the continent of Africa. The pilot episodes of the series were authorized to be novelized and written by R.A. Salvatore, and is thus considered canon with Edgar Rice Burroughs' novel series. A second season was planned but unfortunately never materialized due to bankruptcy. 1998's Tarzan and the Lost City was the next depiction of the character and was played by Casper Van Dyn. This depiction of Tarzan sees him much later in life, taking on the mantle of John Clayton II and living in England with his wealthy surroundings, as well as getting married to Jane. The film was shot in the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal, both provinces in South Africa, becoming the first movie to be filmed entirely on the African continent. The same year, an animated film of The Lord of the Apes was released titled Tarzan of the Apes. This 48 direct-to-video release adapted the story of Edgar Rice Burroughs, with the exception that Tarzan lived with what appears to be chimpanzees rather than apes, a similar mistake to the one that the Disney movies would also make. Not much more can be said about the animated release that failed to capture the hearts of fans. The following year, Disney released its animated masterpiece, Tarzan, and instantly captured the hearts of fans across the globe. Arguably the most well-known portrayal of Tarzan, this animated film introduced younger audiences to the character and adapted the original novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs, being the first animated major motion picture version of the story. Tony Goldwyn was cast to be the voice actor for Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, who in this depiction was raised by apes, not gorillas. This depiction of Tarzan spawned a sequel series that was also edited into a television movie and a prequel movie exploring Tarzan's years as a youth in the jungle. A Broadway musical and 5 video games were also inspired by the Disney film. Needless to say, the Disney adaptation brought new fans to the franchise and breathed new life into the classical tale. Our next adventure with the Jungle Man was 2003 series Tarzan. The show was set in modern-day New York and follows Tarzan helping others in need and assisting NYPD Detective Jane Porter in solving crimes. The series was cancelled after 8 episodes, with the series receiving mixed to average reviews. In 2013, a CGI motion capture German film titled Tarzan was released. The film was received rather negatively with fans, finding the subpar plot and forgettable characters incredibly disappointing. The liberties taken and adjustments made with characters and motivations changed a lot of what fans enjoyed and looked forward to in a Tarzan property. Ultimately, this animated film struggled to leave the shadow that was cast on it from the Disney animated film that was released over a decade before. The final live-action portrayal to date of the legendary character of Tarzan was in 2016, titled The Legend of Tarzan. This live-action film cast Alexander Skarsgård in the role and depicted John Clayton living in England as the Earl of Greystoke, far removed from his past as Tarzan. The movie follows John returning to Africa and attempting to rescue Jane after she has been kidnapped. The film received mixed reviews, but many fans of the series were happy to finally receive another theatrical release for the character. And so, to date, the latest and final portrayal of Tarzan was in Netflix's Tarzan and Jane series. The series follows a teenager Tarzan who receives supernatural powers after a plane crashes and his relationship with Jane Porter as he protects his home in the jungle. The animated series consists of 2 seasons, and despite including Edgar Rice Burroughs in the title, the show takes liberties with his source material. And that is the long history of Tarzan in film and television. The character has obviously changed and evolved since his inception in the early 1900s, and I believe that we are going to continue receiving remakes and new adaptations for years to come. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. It really does mean the world to me. I know this was a long one. I've been speaking for over 45 minutes. We'll see how it turns out in the edit. But if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and do not be afraid to subscribe to my channel to receive more videos like this one.